The goal of the show is to help you break in and thrive in advertising and marketing. Welcome back to our brand side segment where we're not talking to advertising agency professionals. No, we're talking to the people that they report to. CMOs, VPs of brand marketing, brand ambassadors, client side folks here, ladies and gentlemen. Today, we are diving into one of the most fascinating brand transformation stories in modern enterprise. Our guest is Maria Winans, the Chief Marketing Officer at Kyndryl, the world's largest provider of IT infrastructure services. And yes, she built the brand and the global marketing organization for an 16 billion, 80,000 person startup from the ground. So, oh my goodness. In this episode, Maria shares how she named and launched Kyndryl, the story behind their new Double Your Impact campaign, and what it takes to lead marketing for a company redefining digital transformation around the world. Her insights are real, actionable, and downright inspiring. So let's get into it. This is the Breaking and Entering Brand Side podcast. And as usual, I'm your accomplice, Gino Schellenberger. Kick it, Mikey. All right, Maria Winans, welcome to the Breaking and Entering BrandSide podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm good, Gino. I'm good. Glad to be here. Excited to be here.
Absolutely. I was telling you before we got on, but I've interviewed so many different creative advertising agency professionals for the past 5 years. So it's so refreshing to actually learn about the marketing side and what you all do and what your expectations are compared to the creative professionals out there. So thank you again for coming on. We're going to talk about you. We're going to talk about your role as a CMO at Kyndryl, the brand story, the transformation, how you broke into marketing, and your best advice for the next generation. How does that sound, Maria?
That sounds great. I love to tell the story and excited, like I said, to be here with you. So
Incredible.
ready to
Incredible.
go.
Let's do it then. So, welcome again to the show. Can you introduce yourself and tell us about your role as CMO at Kyndryl?
All right. Well, listen, I will start out. Yes, you said I'm a CMO at Kyndryl, and it's been an incredible opportunity. I know we're going to talk about the journey of
Mhm.
getting to Kyndryl and Kyndryl, even the name. But I'd have to say, Gino, my previous career prior to Kyndryl was being part of IBM for almost 29 years. And I had an incredible opportunity, incredible career. And then now I would say an incredible opportunity to join Kyndryl from the very beginning. So
Yeah.
I really looked at this as an opportunity to take the best of my previous career into something completely new. Because the day that we became public at Kyndryl was, we became actually the largest technology services startup at scale. And I looked at it as an opportunity to do this kind of once in a career kind of move, become, Kyndryl CMO, be able to lead our global marketing team around the world, from brand to advertising to really our field marketers that, right there are working with the sales team in front of our customers. And, we'll talk a little bit about it. I know you're going to ask me about the creation of Kyndryl, but
Hmm.
was able to create the brand and the identity of the brand, the voice, the market presence from the very beginning. And when I say
Wow.
once in a career opportunity, who gets to not only build a brand but also build a global marketing organization from the ground up. Bringing together diverse kind of set of skills and experiences, and really setting a foundation for an incredible kind of journey ahead.
Oh, yeah. This is going to be awesome. And that's so
Yes.
incredible. You spent so long at IBM and then that spun off there. So let's get into that. So Kyndryl spun off from IBM in 2021. I actually knew somebody that was like involved in that who was working at IBM and then
Oh,
worked at
really?
Kyndryl. Yeah, yeah. And he was talking with me about it. And so you were brought in as one of the first employees to build a brand from scratch. Can you walk us through what that experience was like? Like, how did you approach building a fresh identity for a $16 billion company with 80,000 employees? Is that even accurate? I don't know. We can fact check that,
Yeah.
but that's mind blowing if that's true. How do you even start?
That's why I said before, we became the largest technology service startup at scale overnight when we became public.
Oh
But,
yeah.
from the very beginning, I looked at this as who gets an opportunity to really do something like this. Build from, like I said, a great foundation, but getting to really to do something new. And with all of that, you lean into discomfort, you lean into taking very bold kind of creative risk and really looking at how do I challenge myself to really build from what I've always kind of known from a marketing, but get to do something very different. And so I will start by answering this or stating this. From the very beginning, I had two jobs to do. Two jobs to do. One, as employee number two, create a brand because at that time we were known as Newco. We were a
Hmm.
brand new company. We didn't know yet, the positioning, the purpose in the sense of what we wanted the company to really stand for. And so for me, job number one was brand. And then job number two was all about the people. How do we motivate 80,000 people to get excited about this journey? And keeping in mind that most of them had been part of IBM for many years. And this was something very, very different that all of us were getting ready to embark on. So, two jobs, brand and people. And so, let me start by brand because, the thing about what was special about this is we were coming from a technology company, a very, very well established technology company. And when we became a services company, we really had to cast and humanize what we do. Because at the end of the day, we don't sell product. We sell the services of our people. Our people are our product. So from the very beginning, it was very clear it was all about relationships and people. And the brand had to have purpose. And what that meant that every brand aspect of the brand that we created had to be intentional. And I remember, Gino, my first conversations and trying to really look at our positioning in talking to customers and talking to employees. And I remember, the customer said two things to me. Whatever happens in this spin, make sure your experts come with you. Those are the people that I trust. Those are the people that are core to running my mission critical work every day. And please make it easier to do business. So when you really think about that, when the customers are telling you the people are the experts, it really became very clear that, in order to set a name, we had to set a name that really meant it's about relationships. It's about, the core of partnership. And this is where we really leaned in on Kyndryl. And we also knew, Gino, that we had to make up a name. Branding is really, really hard. And to get any type of global trademark is a huge challenge. So we always leaned into the side of saying we needed to create a name. And so we leaned into this whole motion of what we call kinship or Kyndryl. Kinship meant strong partnerships with customers. The whole notion of kin, your best of kin
Hmm.
are those people that you trust, those people that, you have the closest relationship to. And then tendril is this plant that continues to grow. It grabs onto something and continues to grow. So we took this notion of kinship and this notion of tendril and put it together and said Kyndryl. And that's really what became the core of our brand aspiration is deepening connections and this continuous growth of in innovation in partnership with our customers. So that's the brand side.
Yeah.
Really exciting. And I have to say, Gino, is one of my favorite memories because very uncomfortable, but just it was an incredible opportunity to just really think outside the box and do something that you knew was going to be core to our journey ahead at Kyndryl.
Nice. And how long did that name take to come up with? Were there some other, what were some other runner ups? Can you talk
Yeah,
about those?
I would say I won't share the runner-ups, but when
Okay.
we started out, we looked at okay, let's think about what names are out there, and I have to tell you, over two. I was going to say 200,000 names. We went, it was kind of one of those funnels. You start big, you
Hmm.
keep going down, work through the legal process, work through
Hmm.
really does this resonate? And as we got closer in the funnel, we went from 700 to 200.
Hmm.
And then we really knew we had to really bring something that was completely different, completely new. And this is when we started down the line. But I mean, we went from 50 to 10 to 7 to the top 5 until we knew that in our guts and at their core, Kyndryl felt right. Because
Wow.
one of the things that became really important was the notion that everyone had to see themselves in the brand. The brand was about them. And so you think about all of these 80,000 employees being part of this company. The mission of the brand was that it had to really be representative of them. And we leaned into motions of, let's set up a culture platform. The brand had to stand for this culture of together, each of us. And we came up with what we called the Kyndryl Way. Along with the brand of Kyndryl, we then established a cultural platform that said everybody had to see themselves in it. Together, each of us, as we would say, advances the vital systems that power human progress. That became kind of our staple. And we set up the culture platform called the Kyndryl Way and started to really talk about behaviors that we wanted to instill as we showed up and engaged with customers. This notion of being restless, empathetic, and devoted were core to our cultural name and platform. We leaned into what the employer brand had to stand for, this notion of when you join Kyndryl, it's about progressing your career forward with purpose. And we did a lot of creative things from the beginning to really put that motion, Gino, that you, the people, are the brand.
I love it. I love it. Incredible. Well done. I mean, to take that opportunity from you were at IBM for 29 years, is that correct? And
Yeah,
then,
29
I mean,
years.
this was a big challenge. Were there any points where you're like, oh my goodness, what did I get myself into? Any, or were you excited along the entire way? How are you feeling throughout all of
Yeah,
this
no, I mean,
process?
from like I said, from the very beginning, it was one of those, I looked at it as a career kind of once in a career
Mhm.
opportunity. What marketer doesn't want to be part of something from the very beginning that gets to instill a brand, create purpose around it, motivate 80,000 people around the world, and be part of that foundation. I said to our CEO in our, after our first year, and I said, we're making history. This is going to be an incredible transformation story that is going to be studied and looked upon. And for me, it's been an incredible journey. Have I felt uncomfortable? Of course. And I will talk little bit about it, but later. But this notion of feeling when you're uncomfortable and you're doing something for the first time, it's when you are most creative, when you
Mhm.
learn, when you really build skills you've never had before and are able to do, first of a kind. And to me, that was a lot of what led me to say, hey, I want to be part of this journey.
Yeah. Well, incredible. Congrats on that launch. And then I want to talk about some of the work that's recently happened. So
Yeah.
this campaign, Double Your Impact, is a shift towards a more human-centered approach. Can you share the insight maybe for for our listeners out there? Explain the campaign, where can they find it, and then talk about the insight behind the campaign, how it aligns with the mission. And I have some other follow-up questions, but I'll start with that.
Yeah, I mean, I love to talk about this campaign because when we think about taking, I would say taking risk, but it's doing something different. One of the things I said to my team is we need to rise above the noise. We need to do something very unique and very different that really speaks to the type of company that we are, showing empathy to the audience that we're trying to reach. And so the campaign is really grounded on this very powerful insight, that it is our CIOs, the CIOs around the world, you know, their job is becoming more complex than ever. It is, because they're trying to manage the operations of today while also trying to drive transformation for tomorrow. This notion of how do I balance everything that I have to do in my workload today to run the systems, to run the business, but then I've got my CEO asking me, what are you doing with Gen AI? What are you doing with AI? How are you transforming, the company into the new? So they're always feeling like they need to balance two things or almost the need to be two people at once. And so understanding and being empathetic to the reality of what CEOs are struggling with, we said, why don't we lean in to how we, as Kyndryl, can support the CIO during this, what we call running and transforming? Because a lot of our heritage resides in the fact that we run mission critical systems for major companies around the world. But we're also involved in many of the transformational discussions, being a strategic partner with our customers, helping them operate and innovate at the same time. And so the creative approach was, gosh, wouldn't it be great if I had a twin? If I had a double of me? That way I can work on the today as my twin works on the tomorrow. And, and this notion of feeling like, gosh, sometimes I feel like I needed another me. And so we
Yeah.
leaned on this creative platform and we actually cast identical twins. We didn't look at any AI generated lookalikes. We didn't do anything that was technology based. We actually went out and casted real twins. And so
Oh
when
my
you think
goodness.
about that, it's witty, it's clever, it's eye catching when you see an advertisement where you have two people and it talks about, hey, sometimes when you feel like you need another person, is that notion of double your impact. And what's interesting, it has been one of our best performing campaigns and creatives. It's had strong engagement from senior leaders across our partners and customers and other brands. And it's also outperformed, any of our previous benchmarks in LinkedIn. So we really went out of our comfort zone, did something very different, and it's proven out. And witty and memorable are what I keep hearing from our team. So very different.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when you take those risks and you engage in creativity, offer a strong insight, in theory, it should garner great results. And it did in this case. So I love the case for creativity and execution on that. Can you tell me, were any creative agencies involved in making this? Was this in-house? Can you give me the rundown there?
Yeah, we work, when our partner, our creative agency is WPP, and they've
Mhm.
been there since the very beginning, working within WPP. WPP is a very large
Oh, yeah.
agency. They have many different agencies within, and we worked primarily with VML, and
Mhm.
then in this creative in this campaign, kudos to them because they really pushed the edge. And then in our brand narrative, our partner is Lander and Fitch, and they've been
Yeah.
there since the beginning as well. So I hold true
Wow.
testament to really the partnership of working with creative agencies that are always challenging us to think differently.
Oh, I'm sure they are. That's good. That's their job, right? Like the push. And
So shout
that's
out
so,
to them here in this podcast as well.
I love it. Lander and Fitch, I have to have somebody on. It's been a while. I'm not sure if I have yet, but they're more brand narrative, right? Like that.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. That's an interesting world.
Oh, it
Uh,
is. And actually,
yeah.
they were a very strategic partner of ours from the very beginning. They were part of the whole journey of creating the brand
Yeah.
that led to Kyndryl.
I
So
love that stuff. Like in another world, I would be like a part of like a branding agency like that. I think it's like breaking and entering, Kyndryl, like those cool names, the meanings behind it. I find that so fascinating.
it
So
truly is an art. I tell you, this was my first experience of doing something at that scale from the
yeah.
very beginning. It is amazing the process of branding. It's amazing the process of really creating not only a brand, but a narrative and a visual identity and a purpose, a mission. Every word counts. Every edge of our Kyndryl logo and brand mark
Hmm.
was with purpose. I tell you, every little edge, every letter, every part of it.
Well, it lasts.
Um,
It's supposed to last forever. Like I obviously some brands rebrand and they change the logo up. For the most part, when you're doing branding projects, they have to last 10, 15 years, if not longer. So it's so much care, attention to detail. So that's why I'm so impressed by this whole transformation here. And I think everybody listening should take notes and study this stuff because it is fascinating. And then you get the campaigns that pulse out every, a couple times a year, reinforce the messaging. Maybe there's a new little nuance in the messaging as well. But that branding stuff doesn't go away.
yeah, and I think one thing that I'll plug in here is I think it's important whenever you do a branding project, you think of where you are today because you don't want to go too far from where you're coming from, but you want to create something that allows you to grow
Hmm.
to what your vision is for the bigger. So that balance of the two, and sometimes when you think about branding, and where you see companies either go too niche that they have to rebrand or
Yep.
they go too far out that they don't really they lose what the company stood for.
Yep.
And so you have to find that perfect kind of center of the today but the aspiration of tomorrow. And I think with Kyndryl, I have to honestly say I think we nailed it.
Crushed it. Crushed it. Yeah,
Crushed.
we took off the advertising portion of our name. And that was just breaking entering media because we want to go into marketing. We want to go into
Yeah.
music and fashion in the future. So we just dropped the advertising portion of that so we can grow too. It seems like you have a lot of room to grow with Kyndryl and that vision.
Yeah.
What
We're headed into year number 3, and it's been an incredible journey.
yeah.
Absolutely.
And I guess like can you tease at some of the like where do you want it to grow as a company? I mean, it's already so large, but you kept it ambiguous for a reason, right? So what are some of your hopes and dreams?
Yeah, we come from, as I like I said, I think we have Kyndryl, and is a brand, where today we are the largest infrastructure services brand in the world, and that's a lot of what we are known for. And it is running the mission critical workloads of our customers, managing their day to day. When you think about even the campaign of the CIO, we just talked about double impact, is that today. But where we're headed and where is growing into new areas of when we think about what most of companies are struggling with today. When you think about migration to the cloud, you think about security, you think about Gen AI, you think about networking, and the whole kind of employee experience and customers. We're going into new areas. And
Hmm.
it became very important that we didn't just niche ourselves in the world that we do today, even though we're the largest, and customers trust us for that, but building on that trust to be a strategic partner in many of their new transformative, opportunities and discussions. So that was one element. The second is, moving up in the stack around our advisory services. We're building our consulting, our advisory, and helping our customers really be, grow into those transformative projects. And that became very important that we as a company stood for both the managed services, which were the largest, to our transformative advisory services, and being able to bring the two together. And that is really at the core of what I believe is very uniquely positioned for Kyndryl. We help our customers run the today as they transform the tomorrow. And so the brand had to stand for and allow us for that ambition that we had instilled in a company, in our strategy and our vision.
Got it. Makes a lot of sense. It's incredible. I want to learn how you broke into all this. How'd you learn all this stuff? So before Kyndryl, like we said, you spent 29 years at IBM. It's a legacy company known for innovation. So what initially drew you to marketing, and how did you break in to the field?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, actually, because I'll take you back into. I'll start with my studies. I went to school in my undergraduate in North Carolina at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill,
Love it. One of my
and
favorite schools.
I love Carolina. I'm a true
Yeah.
Carolina Tar Heel at heart.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is my studies were in twofold. I received a business degree, and I was in business school.
Mhm.
But at the same time, I did a double major with art, business and art. And it was that unique combination of the analytical side with the creative side, right brain, left brain. And I remember when I was at Carolina, and I said to my advisor, I want to do business, but I also want to do art. And I remember, he said to me, he's like, really, Maria? That's two different sides. You're either good at one versus the other, or one has a strength over the other. And I remember that I almost had to get exception to be able to do a double major of that difference in, at the same time. I didn't know back then, honestly, where that was going to take me, but I knew that I had this very creative thinking, but I also loved strategy, numbers, math, business, analytical side. So the combination of business as art was my kind of my first, like, hey, this is
Mhm.
something different. It's actually very unique. When I joined IBM, I started in sales, so I gained a real strong foundation in what I would say customer needs, relationship building, business dynamics, being in front of customers and selling. And then, throughout my career, I had various roles that really stretched me to broader perspective. But what I always found was this notion of, I always brought this creative side and applied it to business problems, to solving problems. And, and it came very natural to me of, the creative side, the visual mindset, my art background, as I thought about how do I approach this business problem? How do I approach this opportunity? How do I approach this conversation? Which naturally led me into this whole notion of I love storytelling, communication, experience design, this whole notion of, how do we market this to be more effective in the way that we show up? So that eventually led me to marketing over time. And it was really the thought, and I would say the art of bringing both sides of my background, the strategic side and the creative side. So I
Definitely.
think it was one of those kind of natural journeys. And I honestly think it's kind of this unicorn when you're able to bring the business and the creative side to really into one. And that's why I love marketing.
Oh yeah, definitely. If I was the advisor at the time, I would have said advertising marketing. That's like the perfect
Yep.
fit, the combination between the two. And when you said analytics, I would have said, okay, marketing,
Yeah,
because
exactly.
that's
It's,
perfect.
it's
How did you get that first job? What was the application like? Did you know somebody? How does one break in to IBM?
Yeah, no, it was interesting because, at Carolina, they always had these, these on campus kind of career fairs.
Hmm.
And, I have to tell you another little kind of side, kind of part of me is I'm very much a fitness, you know, just junkie.
Hmm.
And even in college, I was very much into fitness, and you'll see why I'm telling you this story. I was teaching classes. I was teaching at the local gym. I was an instructor as I was going to college.
Hmm.
And what was interesting is I thought, hey, get my degree. And I was doing very well. I had a great following in my fitness classes. They were always booked. I said, I'm going to open up my own gym. I'm going to open up my own gym and I am going to go the fitness route in my career. Built my own business, create my own kind of, and I was headed that way. So then here comes IBM on campus. And I remember, this is interesting. Never thought I would work for a technology company. And I remember my mom saying to me, hey, I think you should really consider this. At least do it for a couple of years, get a feel for the business side, and then you can venture off and do something on the fitness. But what was interesting is when I joined IBM and I said, okay, I'll do this for a couple of years, make money, and
Hmm.
then go open up my own gym and head in my fitness career. And here I am. It was 29 years later. I found myself with an incredible career at
Yeah.
IBM. What intrigued me so much was just smart people, the ability to really do so much. And I felt like I worked for many different companies with IBM. I did so many roles. But interesting enough, at the same time, I've been an instructor for over 30 years. I have taught every single class, boxing, kettlebells, circuit training, TRX, every type of fitness at the same time. And it's amazing how your career or your life journey becomes. Because I think if I would have made a career out of fitness, I wouldn't do it with the passion that I do
Hmm.
and the heart. And, the notion of having that as kind of my hobby and being able to then work and do something very, just challenging and growing as I have on my career, that's now led me to Kyndryl, today. So
Yeah.
it's interesting how life journey takes its shape.
You bring up a good point about the passion projects, and I saw online, I saw a video. It's like you have to be kind of careful if you go all in on your passion and like make that your career, like how I'm doing now with this podcast. You have to be ready that this is going to like take over, and then you might have some resentment around it. You're depending on it. What you
Because
love to
you're
do as a
depending on it.
hobby.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I've
Yep.
noticed that too. And I think you made the right obviously you made a great decision. It worked out and you were able to balance what you loved, and that probably flourished because of that balance between the two. They both helped each other out in your career and it's been successful. So thank you for
Yeah. No,
sharing
one of
that.
the things I say, I said in life, you should have three hobbies. I call them hobbies. A
Mhm.
hobby that keeps you healthy,
Mhm.
and that's kind of my fitness. A
You
hobby that
got that. Yeah.
tests you creatively, whether for me it's art. I still practice art. I still do a lot of artwork. And then third, a hobby that makes you money. And that became my career, IBM and into Kyndryl now. So three
I love that.
hobbies.
What type of art do you engage with? What do you do?
I do big murals, acrylic. I mean, I've done every kind of art as part of my art background that I had to go through art school, but my passion is really painting. I don't know if you've ever seen the artist Georgia O'Keeffe. I do a very similar. I love colors. I love, the blend of colors. It's more on leans on the abstract, but really the visual of taking colors and how they flow together, whether it's one color that you can take and stretch into various shades to various types of colors. So to me, it's I do anything from small to huge wall murals. And like I said, it's my stress relief. It's my ability to just kind
Yeah,
of let go and just paint and be creative with a paintbrush and with a canvas,
I love it.
with a blank canvas in front of me.
Nice, nice. So I want to get into your advice. You know so much, you've shared a lot already, but this first one is for the young marketers, people that are already broken in, maybe at a brand, maybe at an agency, probably more so brand. Like whether they're at startups, spin-offs, or established companies, what are the key lessons you've learned that they should keep in mind? Something that you wish you knew just starting off.
Yeah, no, there's a couple of lessons as I reflect back, my step into Kyndryl, or as I think about even my career. I think this notion, and you hear it, but it really became its true form for me more than ever when I became CMO of Kyndryl. This notion of leaning into the discomfort of growth. Be comfortable with feeling uncomfortable, and when you go outside of your comfort zone, you learn. The second one that I would say is don't play it safe. I always tell my team, think bold, ask bold questions, challenge assumptions, explore new ways of thinking. You know, don't play it safe in we've always done it this way type of motion. Stay open to what's next. Bring ideas forward. This notion of let go of how it's always been done. And this is something that I challenged my team today. I said we have a blank canvas in front of us as we set out on this journey with Kyndryl. What have you always wanted to do that you couldn't do before? Let's bring those ideas forward. So this notion of leaning into discomfort for growth, this notion of not playing it safe and being open to what's next. And then my other one that I always, when I look back, people ask me, what keeps you up at night? And I said, it's actually what gets me up in the morning. And this notion of embracing risk as part of the journey. That this notion of growth requires experimentation. Growth requires, sometimes failing, taking very big steps. And I say, this notion of I really don't fear risk. I actually have taken many risks in my career and in my life. What I do fear is regret, is meaning looking back and thinking, gosh, if I only would have been more bold, if I only would have spoken up, if I only would have brought that idea forward, if I only would have taken that leap, that notion of embrace risk as part of a journey. What's the worst that can happen? You will learn through failure and you will iterate for the next time. So to me, that those have become kind of, as I think about my key lessons that I would share, have been core to kind of my growth in my personal growth in life and at work.
I love it. Then how can people reach out to you if they have further questions, whether marketers or students, if they want to say hello? What's the best way to reach out to you, Maria?
Yeah, no, I'm very active on LinkedIn. I
Good.
love the LinkedIn platform. I'm always, sharing my experiences, the work that we do at Kyndryl. So anybody can reach out to me through message or on LinkedIn.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for sharing the story, and I wish you all the best with Kyndryl and its and the vision that you have, and I hope it stays steady and grows. It's such a good time, and it means so much to me and to our listeners. It's going to change their lives. So, Maria, thank you again for coming on the show.
Thank you, Gina. Appreciate it and appreciate the time. Thank you.
Wonderful.